This video is part of a series I'm doing wherein I will be watching every Studio Ghibli film chronologically and sharing my thoughts about them. If you're watching this part before you watched part 1, I'd recommend going back and starting from the beginning since I explained some important information about this video series. That said, let's talk about the second film in Studio Ghibli's library, Hotaru no Haka, or Grave of the Fireflies from 1988. And spoiler warning. Guys, I was not prepared for this movie. I don't like to do any research about shows or movies I watch because trailers always tend to show the most exciting part of the movie to pique the audience's interest. And even though those clips are always played out of context so the movie or show is technically not spoiled, I always find it more impactful when I'm watching a movie and I don't think, hey, that's the clip I saw in the trailer. So I didn't do any research on Grave of the Fireflies before watching. All I knew was that it came from Studio Ghibli, which is primarily known for movies like My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, and Ponyo. Plus, I just watched Castle in the Sky the day before recording this, a pretty lighthearted adventure story, so just imagine my surprise when I click play on this movie and the first scene is the main character dying on the floor of a train station. Yeah, this movie's about World War II, specifically the lives of Seita and his younger sister Setsuko as they attempt to survive in a Japanese town which is frequently under aerial assault from, I'm assuming, the United States, though I don't think the movie clarifies. It's not important. And Jesus, this movie does not sugarcoat anything. I mean, I've seen war movies, but watching Grave of the Fireflies really puts into perspective how much some works of media glamorize it. The movie really shows you every detail of these people's lives, and speaking from the perspective of someone who's fortunate enough to come from a family without major financial struggles, it was truly gut-wrenching to see how terrible of living conditions these people were dealing with. And what was almost worse than that was seeing how happy and excited the main characters would get over the simplest little commodities that I and most people in the modern first world probably take for granted. Medicine, beds, food, etc. were all scarce resources, and in the movie it just never lets up on showing you how horrible these people have it. And geez, just watching the slow decline of Setsuko, this adorable, innocent little girl, nearly brought me to tears, which does not happen that often. The moment when I realized that the two little blush marks on her cheeks had gone away, my stomach just dropped. And I think this is the strongest aspect of this film. Like I said earlier, it doesn't sugarcoat anything, and because the narrative stays laser focused on the main two characters for the whole movie, you find yourself getting really attached to them, even though this film is pretty short, especially when compared to what most modern movies feel like. I also felt like there was sort of a subtle theme of being rejected by society, like Seika and Setsuko are really just not respected by the other members of the community, and this arguably played a sizable role in why they both end up dying. On the other hand, there definitely is also a sort of you do whatever you can to survive even if you have to step on others to do so vibe going on, so I don't want to say that the creators were trying to downplay how people can be driven to do terrible things when in a time of war, but like especially with how Seita and Setsuko's aunt seems to think of them as just a nuisance and nothing else despite the terrible stuff they've all gone through, I think this was an intended theme. The one part of this film's story that I wasn't as crazy about was the flash forward at the beginning, which reveals that both Seita and Setsuko are dead, but their spirits seem perfectly happy to just be together, which is totally great, but I think knowing that the two leads are going to die may have detracted from the story's emotional impact, and then knowing that they would both be happy after death may have had a similar effect. If it were up to me, I think I would have kept the first scene the same, except don't explicitly reveal that Setsuko is dead and that the spirits are happy after they depart from their bodies. This way you'd maintain the element of dread from knowing that Seita will die, but because you don't know Setsuko's fate yet, her death feels all the more like a punch to the gut. Then the final scene could establish that they reunited after death, which would be all the more heartwarming now, and it still is very heartwarming even in its current state. Still, these are just minor criticisms I had of the narrative, but with that said, let's move on to the presentation, and I don't think this movie's visual and sonic showcase was as strong as in Castle of the Sky. While the visuals were technically impressive, I think I enjoyed the variety and whimsy that was present in Ghibli's first movie a little more. There were a few memorable shots though. Of course, there's the well-known and iconic Firefly sequence, which is absolutely beautiful. Just like what I said in the last part about not seeing that many really good animated background sequences in anime, I haven't seen that many really spectacular uses of lighting in animation, so that scene was especially impactful. impactful for me. But I think my favorite visual moment of the whole experience would have to be at the end of the movie after Setsuko dies and Seita is just pushed super far away from the camera to illustrate how small and hopeless he feels without her. Overall though, I feel like I more so remember what happened to the characters rather than the setting it was happening in. This isn't really a big deal in my opinion, but in comparison to Castle in the Sky, that movie had several extremely memorable visual moments, whereas Fireflies seemed to be more focused on capturing the emotions of the characters within its story, which it does incredibly well. Anyway, in terms of this movie's audio experience, I want to call special attention to the voice acting, which I felt was absolutely amazing. Pretty much everything I've mentioned about how gripping the emotions of this story are only get amplified by the vocal performances. And the highlight in this regard definitely goes to Setsuko, whose voice actor just does an incredible job capturing the confusion and helplessness of a child living in the middle of a war setting. Man, when she was malnourished and started hallucinating inedible objects as food and then tried to offer what she thought were rice balls to Seita was just purely heartbreaking, and it really communicated that she was beyond the point of no return. Similar to how I feel about the film's visuals in comparison to Ghibli's last film, I didn't feel like there was any one musical piece that was as memorable as some of the songs from Castle in the Sky, except kinda the track that plays over the scene after Setsuko dies, and we get to see all the flashbacks of her playing around the bomb shelter that she and Seita made a home at. That was a really good sequence. I also didn't feel like there was much in the department of sound effects, with the sole exception of the can of candy. Man, they put so much effort into that can. Like when Setsuko thinks it's empty and then Seita hits the bottom of it to make the drops that had melted to the inside of the wall fall out. All I could think of was how Nintendo had that presentation where they demonstrated the HD rumble effect of the Switch's Joy-Cons, and how you could tell how many marbles were inside this completely fabricated, non-existent box just by rotating the controller. This is like that, but with sound. It's HD sound. Anyway, I think that wraps up everything I had to say about Grave of the Fireflies. Overall, I really liked this movie, though it feels kind of weird saying that I liked a movie which is about two children who are victims of one of the greatest tragedies in world history, so I guess I'll just say that I think this movie is very good. I don't know if I prefer it more or less than Castle in the Sky, but I definitely like them both, and truthfully, they're just two completely different films. You know, Castle in the Sky is more focused on conveying its impressions through aesthetics and presentation, whereas Grave of the Fireflies seems to be more focused on its narrative, and this is completely ignoring the massive differences in tone and themes between these two works. I really can't overstate how much I was taken off guard by this film, and I can't help but feel like that may have contributed to my enjoyment of it. Just goes to show how the context that you watch a piece of media in can have a pretty big impact on your experience with it. Anyway, that's my take on Grave of the Fireflies. I'd love to hear what you guys thought about it if you're watching these movies along with me, or if you had just already seen this film prior to me making these videos. Thank you guys for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll tune in next time where I'll be watching Tonari no Totoro, or My Neighbor Totoro. You can check the description for the schedule of when each part in this video series will be released, and with that said, I hope you have a wonderful day, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.